Good evening, and welcome to this special meeting of the Boston School Committee. I'm Chairperson Jerry Robinson. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask my colleagues to please unmute and join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because this is a remote meeting, I will ask Ms. Parvex to please call the roll. Ms. Parvex, you're muted.
Sorry, I'm having problems with my computer. Dr. Alkins?
Present.
Mr. Cadente Hernandez?
Present.
Ms. Lima Barbosa?
Present.
Ms. Polanco Garcia? Mr. Tran?
Present.
Mr. O'Neill?
Present.
And Ms. Robinson?
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you, Ms. Parvex. Tonight's session is being shared live on Zoom. It will be rebroadcast on Boston City TV and posted on the school committee's webpage and on YouTube. Tonight's meeting documents are posted on the committee's webpage, bostonpublicschools.org/school committee, under the July 19th meeting link. The meeting documents have been translated into all of the major BPS languages. Any translations that are not ready prior to the start of the meeting will be posted as soon as they are finalized. The committee is pleased to offer live simultaneous interpretation virtually in Spanish, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean, Cantonese, Mandarin, Vietnamese, and American Sign Language. The Zoom interpretation feature has been activated. Zoom participants should click the globe icon at the bottom of your screen to select your language preference. I'd like to remind everyone to speak at a slower pace to assist our interpreters. We'll move right into our report, Superintendent's School Year 2023-24 Summative Evaluation. We will have an hour of public comment after the presentation and discussion. Dr. Alkins, who with Vice Chair O'Neill has helped to lead this process, is joining us tonight from the airport while he awaits to board a flight. So that is why we have shifted our agenda timing. Dr. Alkins is leading our presentation tonight. The superintendent has completed her self-evaluation, which has been distributed to the committee for review. Each committee member has finalized their individual evaluations, providing their insights and assessments of the superintendent's performance. Dr. Alkins and Vice Chair O'Neill have consolidated our feedback into a comprehensive summative evaluation, which will be presented this evening. We will vote on the superintendent's evaluation at our next meeting on August 28th. I will now turn it over to the superintendent for remarks, followed by Dr. Alkins, who will present the summative evaluation. After their presentations, I will open it up for comments on the superintendent's evaluation from other members. Superintendent?
Great, thank you, Chair Robinson. Certainly, I'm grateful for this opportunity to reflect on the past 2 years and to speak with you, the committee, and the public about my work as superintendent and the strides we are making as a district. First, I want to thank you, Chair Robinson, Vice Chair O'Neill, and all members of the school committee for your continued support and direction as I begin year 3 of my superintendency. I want to thank you for your questions and your collaboration. All of you bring certainly a different experience set and lens to the work, and your expertise and advocacy help me better serve the city's students and families. Every day, I wake up feeling positive and excited about the work ahead and proud of what we've accomplished together so far. I'm grateful that each of you on this committee has confidence in my leadership, and I'm excited to continue pushing this crucial work forward in partnership with each of you. As you requested, I focused my self-eval on the feedback shared in last year's evaluation. Together with my team, I did my best to align that feedback with the goals of this committee, our district priorities, and the standards for the superintendent evaluation set forth by DESE. Superintendents, especially leaders of large, complex districts like Boston, do not do this work in isolation or alone. One of my top priorities has and will continue to be building a diverse, talented, and committed leadership team and staff who believe in the mission of the BPS and who are fully capable and willing to put their passion and talents forward in the service of our children and families. As part of my self-evaluation, I provided you with many different examples and data points to show that while we are not where we want and need to be, we are moving in the right direction. I have continuously said that progress must be our measure of success. It's important to me that as members of the committee, you deeply understand the incredible work that our leadership team and staff are bringing district-wide to BPS in many areas, such as academics, operations, equity, family, and community advancement. I appreciate the time that we've spent together in these meetings, learning about the work, and with the time I've spent with you in our schools, seeing the work in action. I've also said a number of times that while we as a district must work with urgency, we must also ensure that our work creates a solid foundation to build upon. Band-Aid solutions work for a period of time, but are also the reason that we're in such a need of better systems and structures in BPS. Serving BPS and the community I love every day and I live in is an honor and privilege. I'm humbled by the incredible talent and passion that I'm surrounded by in this district and the level of commitment that the school-based and central office staff bring to this work each and every day. We know we still have much work to do to fully address the historical disparities in student outcomes and the institutional racism that led to them for our Black and Brown students, our special education students, and our multilingual learner students with and without disabilities. That's why we're focused on implementing the inclusive education and the long-term facilities plan with urgency, but not at the expense of quality and input from our stakeholders. We need to get this incredibly important work right, and it has to last well beyond my administration and your service on the school committee. And we must center every decision around what's best for our students, and we must ensure that equity is embedded throughout our work. Change will not happen overnight here. It needs to happen each and every day in the way that we approach our systems and structures, our practices and policies, and how we serve our students, staff, and families. I want to take a few minutes to just walk through some of the key highlights from the work that we've accomplished throughout the year. I want to start with the work that we've done to ensure we are taking an equitable lens to all of our work. We crafted our vision for racial equity this year that is responsive to where the district is now, learning from systems and practices in the past to thoughtfully assess what has and hasn't worked. We are intentionally recommitting to this incredibly important work, moving forward to embed equity within our operation through tangible practices like continuous learning and training for our staff. We have listened to our central and school-based teams who have provided feedback that helped shape internal structures for self-accountability. And we're committed to continued improvement in this space, including creating an internal equity council that will convene staff members with expertise in our core equity initiatives in order to really break down the persistent silos and act as an internal advisory body for our work. As we plan for next year, I'm also really excited to work with the OAG office and the OAG task force to update the 2016 OAG policy and implementation plan. We've learned a lot over these last several years, and a refresh of the policy will help refine our work. It'll help us better monitor implementation and ensure that we're working across our systems. We're also eager to respond to the growing needs of our community with the newly formed Office of Civil Rights. Building on the foundation laid by the Office of Equity, we will expand our efforts to help us foster a healthy and responsive district, free of bias, and establish greater coherence in safeguarding the rights of our students with disabilities and multilingual learners. To do this work well, we are investing in professional development across the organization. We're revamping the racial equity and leadership training for staff to include training on microaggressions and increase support with the racial equity planning tool, which I want to be clear, we remain fully committed and want to sharpen. And we are working to strategically align key offices to drive collective impact. We've worked with the Office of Opportunity Gaps to help them shift their work to the Teaching and Learning Division. The OG office will be situated for systemic impact as part of our core strategy to improve learning for our students. There's already substantial collaboration between the two offices, so we're very excited to bring the teams directly together to work. This will allow a more cohesive integration into our work, like equitable literacy, as well as the regional model through quality school plans. Building on the work of OAG and the Office of Teaching and Learning, I'm going to just share a few of the exciting work pieces around academics and instructional leadership. We've continued our focus on equitable literacy and the implementation of high-quality instructional materials, with 82% of classrooms observed utilizing grade-level content in school year 23-24, and this is in comparison to just 56% in 22-23. This past year was a planning year for the implementation of inclusive education. All schools convened inclusive planning teams focused on planning for specific grade levels, and educators participated in an additional 8 hours of PD focused on building foundational knowledge relative to inclusive ed. As we begin SYF, the school year 24-25, inclusive practices are being implemented in grades K0, K2, 7th and 9th, and school IPTs are beginning planning for additional grades to implement in school year 25-26. The Council of Great City Schools recommended a phased approach over 4 years, including a planning year. We will learn a lot from what we take this first year alone, and we'll continue to make adjustments as we learn and we grow. Upon reflection of the inclusion planning team process, we are implementing some changes as a result of the feedback that we received from different stakeholders. For example, we'll be focused on progress monitoring this first year of implementation for both students with disabilities and our multilingual learners. I'm also proud that we are increasing the number of community hub schools from 14 to 20 this year. We know that our schools do so much more for our students beyond just academics. And we know that our students can't learn if they don't have a community that supports them and resources that help them and their families. The hub model has proven to be successful, and we're working together with the BTU and community partners to make sure our students have what they need. We're also focused on continued work around student re-engagement through many avenues, including the Win the Day pilot in Region 8. The data there is encouraging, showing that this kind of re-engagement work produces results and allows us to really stay focused and keep students in the classrooms. Chronic absenteeism rates continue to decrease, with larger decreases for our transformation schools compared to our non-transformation schools, and that's exceptionally important. Ensuring our students come to school is critical, but we must also ensure that they have a sense of belonging and see options for their future. This is one of the reasons that we're continuing to grow our early college and career pathways programs, which have recently added or will be adding 10 new programs across 9 schools for this upcoming school year. This is just some of the good work that the academics team is doing to bring strong instruction equally across all of our schools so that we can deliver the high quality academic experience all of our students deserve and help them achieve their dreams for their future. I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about management and operations next. My team is rooted in learning and getting better. It's a big part of the work that we're doing with operations by putting systems in place so that we can track and measure our success. This data is critical to helping us understand better what is not and is working and where we must prioritize resources. We also know that a strong professional culture within BPS is paramount to accomplishing the kind of complex work that we're undertaking, and equity must be at its core. We improved our hiring and retention practices at the district level, particularly around stabilizing our principal corps and increasing the retention and recruitment of staff so that as leaders, we share our students' experiences, races, ethnicities, and languages. And just a couple of months ago, we launched the Dr. Carol Johnson Leadership Fellowship to ensure that we're providing an opportunity for people within the district to grow into effective leaders. We have an incredible cohort of 15 leaders working to ready themselves to take the next step in their career here at BPS. We've also made significant strides across our district operations. In transportation, compared to the 22-23 school year, our on-time performance reported to DESE for 23-24 increased by 2.4 percentage points in the AM and 4.5 percentage points in the afternoon. We also began the 23-24 school year with nearly 200 more bus monitors than the year prior, and we achieved full staffing of bus drivers and bus monitors during the 23-24 school year. Robust new hiring and training pipelines, including the new City Academy training facility announced last Friday, will help us maintain full staffing as we look to the future. We continue to meet regularly with our Transportation Advisory Council to identify and collaborate on additional areas for continued transportation improvements for students, families, and schools. I was with Mayor Wu on Friday, this past Friday, showcasing our new yellow bus technology called Zoom, which shares real-time bus information and updates with parents through the Zoom application app, and will provide us with important data on transportation performance and student ridership. This will help us improve our daily bus operations even more. And that's just scratching the surface on the improvements this technology brings for families, our drivers, and our schools. I also want to share that we are now entering this coming year because of the systems that we've built around training and hiring, where we're actually above 100% hiring for bus drivers and bus monitors for the upcoming school year. Not something that we could ever say a few years ago. The Transportation Department is just a great example of our commitment to continuous improvement. Just a few years ago, when we think back, we were in such a different place. They've made consistent progress year after year and continue to implement new tools, technologies, and systems to improve the services we provide. And we're making strides with our facilities as well. You've heard me say again and again that everything we do must be focused on ensuring that our students have equitable access to the high-quality student experience, which is why we're steadfast on implementing the long-term facilities plan with urgency, but also with care and thoughtfulness for our impacted staff, students, and families. I know some were expecting more school closures, mergers, and reconfigurations this year. But at the end of the day, we had to put our students at the center of the work. We must ensure that students are moved to a high-quality seat if they are impacted by a closure or a merger. As I shared earlier, we're focusing on delivering strong instruction and providing more opportunities across all schools. So when we do close or we do merge, families understand what high-quality options they have for their students. And this is why we're excited to have 11 major capital projects underway, more than the last 40 years combined. With those projects combined with new tools like the facilities condition assessment and the school design study, I'm confident that we're laying the foundation so that this work is sustainable in the long run with how students experience their education. It has to be our priority. I'm also proud of our thoughtful approach to budgeting and when with ESSER coming to an end. We took a forward look approach, which put us in a strong position over a 2-year period as a district to maintain funding for student-focused programming, services, and staff, both for this year and beyond. In our 24 budget, more than a year before the end of ESSER, we invested $15 million to ensure that schools were able to transition their highest priority items onto the general fund. In our FY25 budget, we continued this work by identifying over $10 million in central office budget reductions to fund additional high priority ESSER initiatives. Because of this approach, we did not see the large layoffs that many other large urban districts did see this year. It's also crucial for our families in our communities to play an active role across all of this work. And I'd like to just share a couple of pieces around our family and community engagement and advancement work. I want to be visible and accessible to our families and to our communities, which is why we developed the Community Engagement Tour, where I had the incredible opportunity to hear directly from dozens of different communities and leaders. We learned a lot from these conversations, and we're really focusing on developing and communicating more clear processes for community engagement across the district. I can say with confidence that my team and I are listening, and we have pivoted on certain things because of community input and feedback, which help shape some of those decisions. And we know that we as a district have to own difficult decisions and clearly communicate those decisions timely with our families and communities. One exciting project that our communications team is actively working on is building out a cohesive district website. This is an incredibly big task that the team has undertaken, and they're designing it with families in mind. You can think of the new BPS website as a central hub of information that will make accessing information a whole lot easier for our families and communities. As things stand now, we plan to launch that new website later this fall. We also ensure that accessibility and language accessibility are built into our everyday operation. We're serving families through our BPS helpline and ensuring that our information and materials are translated into all BPS languages. We also have purchased two-way translation devices that will be distributed across the district to every school so that families can immediately communicate live to any staff in the building in any language they speak. Last week, I had the opportunity to kick off our August Leadership Institute, ALI. This is really a tradition. I remember it all the way back to 1996 when we began it. But this is really where we bring together all of our school leaders and senior staff to really connect, reconnect, refocus, and plan for the year ahead. I shared with them my excitement for this year because I believe that this year we will begin to see the impact of our foundational work. We're seeing the needle moving in the right direction in so many different areas, data points. In addition to all the work mentioned above, we've moved out of the state's bottom 10 percentile. No small task, and it's really due to our team's consistent work every day of the year. The past 2 years have been technical focused, building those systems, structures, foundations. It's focused on what we must do. This year, we start moving on the adaptive work, and that really focuses on how we will do it. Some of the questions that I shared at ALI for our leaders to think about, I will say here. How will we review our practices as schools and networks to bring our work to the next level? How will we observe our classrooms and shift our structures and practices to serve students in the least restrictive environment? How will we truly center the identities and assets of our students to cultivate a sense of belonging for all of our students? How will we expand students and support students' academic language development? How will we plan high-quality professional development for our staff so that they too can raise the bar in every classroom, in every school, in every day? As we prepare for this year, this is the work ahead. Serving the students and families of Boston is my greatest honor. Our kids are depending on us, and I take that responsibility very seriously, as does my team. I'm confident that all of this foundation building has set us up to accelerate our work this year and beyond. And I'm looking forward to doing this work with all of you, both our short and long-term work, and continuing to develop new strategic school committee goals for BPS this fall. All of this is in service of our city's greatest asset, which is our students. So thank you again for the feedback, for your involvement and commitment, and I look forward to working with you this year and to hearing the feedback on my evaluation.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent. I'll now turn it over to Dr. Alkins.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for the synopsis, Superintendent. I think the theme that we walk away with as a school committee is twofold. One of confidence and one of criticality. Our role as a committee is to provide that feedback, to see where areas can be improved. And while we do that, I think I want to know, and I think I speak for all of our school committee members, where we say that we do have confidence in your ability to lead this district. We do speak, we believe that you are turning this this district in the right direction, and that we want to do what we can to support. Additionally, our reflection in the evaluation is also representative of all the great work that the school-based teams are doing and the central team is doing. And we want to be there to see where we can improve processes, do better, and really getting at the level of the most detail that we can, so that we understand really what the issues are that we need to address moving forward. So I think before I get into just the summative evaluation, I think this is an opportunity to say thank you to all the teams that have been working diligently under your watch, and really have been working alongside you and with our students to make strides. And we agree, change is not going to happen overnight. And I will say that, as with any evaluation process, you see the wide range of how each of us looks at the work, looks at the evaluation process, and I think that came out in our summative evaluation. So before I share slides for this presentation, Michael, do you want to, or Vice Chair O'Neill, I'm sorry, do you want to add any introductory comments?
No, Dr. Alkins, I think you captured it perfectly. Thank you.
All right, let me share my slide. Can everyone hear me now? Okay. So as a school committee, we have a series of responsibilities. Most critically, defining the mission, vision, and goals of the Boston Public School District, establishing and monitoring the annual operating budget, hiring and managing and evaluating the superintendent, our reason for this presentation today, and setting and reviewing district policies and practices to support student achievement. And so the evaluation really took place over a series of months. And so It really involves a set of agreed upon goals. So every fall, we as a school committee with the superintendent undergo a retreat where we're able to discuss those goals. We are able to discuss the alignment with those goals. Do those goals need to change? And thinking about what are the best ways that we should be measuring or looking for those outputs that reflect those goals or progress towards those goals. Additionally, the evaluation is preceded by a self-evaluation that is constructed by the superintendent that gives us some insight into what have been the accomplishments for the year, but also directions where the superintendent believes that the district should be going moving forward. And then after that, each school committee member is tasked with writing their own individual member evaluations. These evaluations are made public. So folks will have an opportunity to read them and address them directly. And then, of course, the summative evaluation is a consolidating process by which we take pieces from each evaluation to really find overall themes that emerge across everyone's evaluation. And then following this presentation, we will be voting on the summative evaluation and performance rating at our next meeting. And so including the timeline here, just showing you how this sort of played out over the series of months. We received the superintendent's self-evaluation in July, and between mid to early August, we collected individual evaluations from school committee members. And then we spent some time constructing that summative evaluation where we were pulling out salient themes. And then we will be voting next week for the summative evaluation and performance rating. So one of the things that helps us provide a better, an insightful evaluation is understanding the DESE standards. And also there's a Boston Public School rubric that allows us to give a little bit more nuance in how our evaluation plays out. But the DESE standards for superintendent's evaluation exists across 4 standards. You heard that just a few minutes ago, and how our superintendent broke down the progress in these different domains. The first being instructional leadership, the second being management and operations, the third being family and community engagement, and 4, professional culture. So here, what we are showing you is a table that sort of helped us as school committee members provide feedback in a constructive way. So what we're looking at is the DESE rubric versus the BPS rubric. So in the top row in gold, you can see that DESE is broken down in terms of performance ratings of exemplary, proficient, minimally effective, and ineffective. But this requires a little bit more nuance in how we're looking at evaluating progress. And so what you see below that is the BPS rubric broken down in terms of performance. The first category is highly effective, which would be given a score of 5. The second category would be effective or developing, which receives a score of 4 or 3 respectively. Note that the effective or developing rating falls under the DESE rubric of proficient. So either an effective or developing rating would still classify under proficient. Third, needs improvement, which receives a score of a 2. And then BPS's rubric for unsatisfactory receives a score of a 1. And so we took each of these domains and rated the performance based upon the superintendent's evaluation and our individual conversations and our own conversations with folks in BPS to help gather the feedback that we felt was necessary to make informed evaluations. So as we look at the first standard in instructional leadership, you sort of heard a great summary from the superintendent. So one of the things that I will speak a little bit on are each of the feedback themes and thinking about where we thought there were areas of strength and where there are areas of growth to look forward to. So just looking at equitable literacy, multiple school committee members noted that Superintendent Skipper has shown urgency around increasing access to high quality instructional materials and increasing the tools with which we are making classroom observations. We were all pleased to see that we do have a rating of 90% of schools adopting HQIM, or high quality instructional materials, with that goal of reaching 100% by next year, acknowledging that we know this is a multi-year effort. And we do know that there can be some immediate positive outcomes for our students, but I think we're all in agreement and aware that the outcome data for this is probably a 3 to 5 year process, at least, to see change. Further, the district, as we note these strides, we still noted as a committee that we need to have clearer plans for ensuring that multilingual learners receive quality native language instruction. As plans are developed and implementation occurs, we still need to grow in our communication around this. We need to think about how materials build understanding and how they continue to be accessible. We are excited about the progress in staffing to support this work, but there is still much to do to ensure that our students are truly receiving access to native language instruction. Regarding inclusive education, the district has definitely increased taken strides and critical steps to make this a reality for all our students. But we all acknowledge that there was much room for improvement. A number of us particularly noted the inclusion planning team process as being as lacking clarity, particularly for schools around their expectations, which led to a bit of confusion and left teams feeling discouraged in the sense that schools did not always receive what they felt they needed to implement inclusion properly. Some feel that we potentially missed an opportunity to really deeply learn and implement what schools were telling us directly. And so I know this is a process that we will take into the future and definitely learn from, and particularly around being clearer in the process. Some other bright spots that the superintendent mentioned, particularly the lowest 10% of districts showing a positive movement when we talk about our transformation schools. There is positive momentum in our secondary schools in regards to the early college and career pathways. We've seen exciting growth like in our community hub schools. So we will have a total of 20 schools, increasing by 6 in the next year. And so those are some of the bright spots of things that we're looking forward to for schools to come online, sort of adding to that idea of increasing quality seats for the district. And then just looking forward, much of the work, and this is always the tough part as an evaluator, to really think about long-term results and how we're really measuring these things. It means that we have to be creative around the accountability metrics that may not show the effects of our efforts in the short term, but really thinking about how we're showcasing it for the long term. This includes considering how we think about measures of accountability and means of support, and particularly just calling out alternative education programs when we think about that. So overall, in this domain, the committee rated the superintendent as effective by DESE standards, which is proficient. And the scores there, as you can see, an average score of about 4.0 out of 5. And here, what you're looking at is just the distribution of our responses, showing 2 school committee members voted the superintendent as highly effective in this domain, 3 as effective, and 2 as developing. As we move to the management and operations domain that promotes the learning and growth of all students and the success of all staff by ensuring a safe, efficient, and effective learning environment, using resources to implement appropriate curriculum, staffing, and scheduling. A few feedback themes emerged. The committee was pleased to see that transportation is continuing its progress from last year. The increase in on-time performance by about 2.4 percentage points, the hiring and paid training of bus drivers and monitors, implementation of new technologies to increase efficiency across the board. The school committee was pleased to see that work. With regard to food nutrition or food and nutrition, the growth in in-house cooked meals was certainly encouraging. The diversity of special meals that are now available to students, giving them a much more balanced diet to choose from. This is still also an area of continued growth. This is about increasing access and thinking particularly when we think about our breakfast delivery and options for those. With hiring and retention, we continue to increase the diversity of our workforce, particularly around race and ethnicity of our educators and staff members. We still must continue to be intentional about this, particularly with regard to increasing multilingual educators and leaders. While our focus has been on recruitment and the development, we have seen positive strides. We need to think about retention practices and how we are monitoring the culture that keeps our multilingual educators and our newer educators and our leaders of color in the district and everyone in the district. Also, the committee noted that particularly in regard to the Office of Human Capital, to be mindful of the perception of how OHC is handling employee relations during challenging needs, and that needs to be more fully considered. It's already encouraging that I believe the superintendent has been in contact with the Council of Great City Schools to begin addressing this. So we are proud to see some of those commitments already starting to come into fruition. Regarding the budget, the school committee last year asked for more clarity around the budget and seeing down to the line item what we were allocating, and the district did a better job this year in providing us with those spreadsheets so that we could have a much more detailed look like in that. That said, we still need to be more forward thinking and thinking about our approach to budgeting with more clarity. Clarity around long-term goals, the sustainability, the clear alignment to the district priorities, and thinking about like truly how is the budget accessible, like for folks to be able to pinpoint what programs are we investing in, where are funds being funneled, and how these decisions are being made. This is also tied to our facilities work. The superintendent noted that more than 11 capital projects are underway, more than the last 40 years combined. That said, we do not have a clear systems level facilities plan, which would really give us a sense of the goals and what the direction and what where the district is headed with regard to our budget. So all these things do in fact tie together. But the committee did note that the superintendent did have very thoughtful analysis around school closures and mergers noting that you do need those quality seats to move students to if you are thinking about closing and or merging schools. We need to continue how we're doing these things. We do need to think about how we expand our definitions, how we're looking at resources in a more creative way that really ensure that students have the buildings that truly do support a quality education. So overall, in this category, the superintendent was rated as effective or proficient with an average score of 3.71. And as you can see, the distribution a little bit more even across the board with 2 school committee members noting a highly effective rating, an effective rating, and a developing rating, and 1 indicating a needs improvement area or rating. As we move into the 3rd domain of family and community engagement, several themes certainly emerge here. But family and community engagement surrounds really the learning and growth of all students and the success of all staff through effective partnerships with families, community organizations, and our value holders that support the mission of the school and district. So here, it was very clear through the superintendent's listening tour that the superintendent and her leadership team made a conscientious effort to be visible and accessible to the community. This was a very thoughtful approach to really hear the range of feedback, positive and critical. And so the willingness to listen to that feedback and in some cases incorporate it directly, like on the fly. For example, the feedback that the superintendent received in the implementation for the inclusion plan for English learners and the facilities planning. This specifically in this decision, also specifically in the decision to slow the pace of closures this year and to increase access to those high quality seats for students who are affected by those closures. So all of these or those examples really, I think, showcased that visibility and that unity there. And so where we think about opportunities here for growth, we think about how multiple times we heard from families and from the school committee directly about thinking about more clarity or deeper clarity in what community engagement is. Thinking about where the specific role is and how equity needs to be centered in the ways that we engage with our community. What does it mean? What constitutes equity and trust? What constitutes an effective use of the racial equity planning tool? How are we sharing that with folks with every decision that we make? And so we had a number of examples this year that showcased that we need to do better. And so the superintendent heard that loud and clear from us. And so summarizing this domain, the composite rating was developing or proficient with an average score of 3.43 out of 5. And as you can see, the distribution, more folks, 4 committee members felt the rating was effective, 2 felt developing, 1 felt needs improvement. And just as a note, I think it was no surprise, particularly to Vice Chair O'Neill and me, that this, that this was perhaps the toughest domain, particularly because understanding what does it mean to be equitable and what does it mean to particularly rate authentic community engagement can be very challenging out of the other domains in comparison. And so what we did both note, and I'm sure committee members would probably agree with this, that when you see strides in those other domains, I think we're going to see strides in the family and community engagement piece. That doesn't mean that we don't need to focus like on how we are doing this more effectively, because we absolutely do. But this was not a surprise that this domain was perhaps the toughest of the four. And then last, professional culture, which is the degree to which the superintendent is promoting success for all students by nurturing and sustaining a school culture of reflective practice, high expectations, and continuous learning for staff. And so multiple committee members noted the support for the regional model that the superintendent has put in place, which is a great system levels approach that we feel can yield greater insight into the school process and how decisions are made, and helping streamline communication. This will also increase school cross-functional leadership, increase decision-making, improve decision-making, improve the implementation of high-quality instructional materials, improve communications to staff and families around occurrences. But it is critical that all regions reach this higher level, and that the liaisons that we have from bowling departments to the regional network, and that we're empowering those folks to be engaged, those liaisons. What we have seen in this past year are some instances of when this is not done properly, schools suffer. Because information is not getting to schools the way that they need to. Families are not getting access to the things that they need to in appropriate timing, and that just creates chaos for our students and for our families. As we move to leadership development, one thing that we noted particularly about even before the superintendent was hired was the need for the district to have stability, and the superintendent was noted by committee members to stabilize her core leadership team and her school leader unit. The leadership pipeline opportunities exist at all levels of the organization, from paras to multilingual teachers to school and central office leaders, which really shows an investment to our employees and a dedication to BPS. And to professional development opportunities that we are looking to foster to improve career development and advancement. As we note, also, when we look at the perception and accountability of the district, we noted this was a measure from last year as well. Numerous school committee members did highlight the decline in accountability that school leaders perceive from the district, from an already low number, while it could be potentially rooted in the issue about the liaison empowerment and engagement, as I mentioned earlier. It still does highlight a critical matter. We need our school leaders and our schools to be to believe in what the district is doing. And if there are measurements that are telling us otherwise, then we need to get to the bottom of that. And we need to really see what's reflecting that decline in perception of accountability there. We've heard some school committee members mention the sort of customer service model of really thinking about thinking of our families as the customers of our district, and in central central office must consistently realize that our individual schools are our families' focus, and we must work together to allow our schools to succeed, really. Thus, there was really strong support, but really a critical eye that this measure needs to continue to be monitored, and really thinking about how we are improving like accountability at the district level. And then finally, as we discuss some of our new partnerships, school committee members noted the importance of developing and maintaining, developing new partnerships, maintaining current partnerships, particularly with nonprofits, cultural business, higher education, philanthropic, and community organizations. It is encouraged to see the ones that we have now under the superintendent's leadership. We have seen a couple, just in this past year. And so this has not gone unnoticed. And we hope that that the importance of developing these partnerships eventually translates over into how we're addressing the opportunity and achievement gaps. And I know the superintendent earlier had mentioned the partnerships, and looking forward to working with this office in this upcoming year. So in this domain, the overall composite rating was effective or proficient with an average score of 3.86 out of 5. And as we look at the distribution, we can see that 2 members rated the superintendent's performance as highly effective, 2 rated the performance as effective, and 3 rated the superintendent's performance as developing. And so as we look at the overall rating for the superintendent averages out to be a 3.75 out of 5, which is a score of effective, or a rating of effective or proficient. And another way of showing you the rubric distribution across all of the domains, but just showing everyone with both the DESE rubrics present and also the BPS rubric present. And if we look at the overall distribution across each domain, this is just the consolidated figure showing the responses from each of the previous slides. And then showing the average rating across each domain. And so overall, just to summarize, there were several areas of strength. Again, noting the equitable literacy strides, also the development of the regional network model, the expansion of community hub schools, early like college and career pathways, our multi-tiered systems of support to really ground students or surround students with the supports that they need to be successful and to show up. The positive momentum noted across the different domains, delivering on-time and efficient transportation, improvements in communication and technology, leadership and development pipeline opportunities through our recruitment, particularly of those multilingual leaders and educators, improved recruitment and hiring practices, our capital projects, and the superintendent's community engagement tour. So just summarizing some of those areas of strength and some areas for continued growth. Continuing to refine the implementation of equitable and authentic community and family engagement practices. This really requires some deep and thoughtful work around what does it mean to have a shared understanding of what engagement is, and where each process that we include the community on, that there is clear understanding and knowledge of what the community's role is in decision making and in the process here. The committee is dedicated to supporting this effort through whatever means we have. 2, to continue and strengthen the implementation practices of the district's core priorities, using examples like the long-term facilities plan and inclusive education, which need to be clearer and have more detail for not just us as school committee members, but also for the school communities and the families that it affects mostly. And also the expansion of district-wide high-quality seats. Third, we need to continue to recruit high-quality staff representatives that represent our student and community diversity. We need to continue to hone our programs and practices that result in increased high-quality staff retention, development, and satisfaction. And we need to, just as a note, we need to think about how we're monitoring that and continuing to monitor that. And fourth, we need to continue to refine and clarify the budget and our budget process, meaning that we need to have a clearer alignment of resources to district priorities and goals, clarity throughout the process, communication that builds a shared understanding among BPS's various audiences, and really points to what the direction is, and shows that we are clearly moving in that direction. And so just to summarize again, the actual steps and timelines. So following this presentation, we will be voting on the summative evaluation and performance rating on August 28th. And that concludes our presentation. But I do want to give time for my fellow committee members to weigh in and provide their feedback.
Yes. Thank you so much for your leadership on all of this, Dr. Alkins, and I'm glad that your playing times have allowed you to remain with us during this. Thank you. So now open it up to members.
Chair, may I just make before other members start making comments, may I just make a closing comment about the work that Dr. Alkins did on this, that we did together?
Yes.
Chair. Okay,
Please
thanks.
do.
So,
thank you.
I just want to point out, and I thank Dr. Elkins for his leadership on this. This has been a lot of work over the past several weeks. I just want to highlight a couple of points he made. One is, the areas of continued growth are very important because, in fact, our conversation last August about the superintendent's evaluation at that time led to the goals and therefore the measures and the metrics that all the committee members looked at for this year, as we talked about in our retreat last October. And then therefore we would anticipate the areas for continued growth that Dr. Elkins just laid out now would be the beginning of the conversations at a coming retreat in October for the goals for the coming year. So that's certainly an important conversation. Second, I want to echo what Dr. Elkins said, that he and I both noted, the family and community engagement is quite frankly one of the hardest areas, right? Because it's about our families building trust with the district. And, we both noted that improvements in instructional leadership and professional culture and management and operations should lead to increased trust by our families, because let's face it, they're smart. They have the fingers on the pulse of what's going on in the district. And when they see improvements, they know it and realize it. And so, it needs work to continue to improve, but it's also the one that is most dependent upon the others improving. And I'll just stop at that. I thank Dr. Elkins overall for his comments. I think it perfectly reflected the summative evaluation. And I do obviously know, Chair, the superintendent's self-evaluation, all 7 members' individual evaluation, and the summative evaluation are all public documents and will be posted on our website for folks to see, as well as, the attachments that the superintendent made that shows the goals, the accountability, and the metrics that were used.
Great. Thank you. Right. Now open it up to members' comments. Dr. Elkins?
Yes, one thing I didn't mention earlier was that the way in which we sort of constructed the evaluation was that we wanted to take quotes or points from each member's evaluation to make sure that we had at least representative points from each member. And so, you know, what's reflected in the summative is either at least like 2 committee members making the same or a similar comment across the theme, which is sort of like a baseline for how information was there. So I wanted to add that note. And then just, you know, my own reflection on the process is that we learned so much about we need as a committee. You know, we're going to continue to be critical. We're going to continue to ask for the things that we feel that the district needs. And I think it's interesting because I was in a privileged position on this process to be able to see how everyone was thinking about their evaluation process. It's hard to think about evaluation of an individual, but also being an outcomes driven body, and being realistic about where we are currently as a district, and then where do we think that we're going, but then also acknowledging that being critical does not mean that there isn't confidence there. And so I encourage my fellow school committee members to continue to be critical, to continue to be reflective, like of the process, because that's how we're all in commitment to bettering the quality of student outcomes and student livelihoods. So I encourage my fellow school committee members to do that in the best way that they know possible.
Great. Thank you. Other comments? Ms. Lima Barbosa?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Elkins and Vice Chair O'Neill, for taking the lead on this. To me, it was an interesting process. This is my first time having the opportunity to provide feedback to Superintendent Skipper. I think what I've been trying to be consistent since I've been appointed is really calling the district into the conversation on improving the community engagement. I think that's been the one thing that I try to always bring up in every conversation that we've had. So I have to agree with Dr. Atkins. That was definitely probably the hardest to go back, reflect on not only the moments that maybe we missed the opportunity, but the moments that were not acknowledged that we missed opportunities. We shift the way on how we're engaging with families. I think we still have a lot work to do, especially when we think about our immigrant families, folks that English is not their first language, our newcomers. You know, those are that was one area that I was not struggling, but I really wanted to make sure that I was being intentional, especially on thinking on how myself as a committee member can also contribute to make information a lot more accessible, but also be clear what a community engagement is. Are we asking for feedback? Are we just informing? And how do we make sure we're doing that in an equitable way? But overall, Superintendent, I just, I've always admire your leadership on bringing your team in and making sure that they're also sitting with us, talking to us, not only in the chamber, but making sure that they are being accessible and not only to the committee, but how do we can make sure that they're accessible as well to the community. I think about even for parents, I know it's good that, often, especially with the tour, y'all were going on to, the school campuses. I wonder how we can sort of figure it out. I know you have the family engagement. I know Chief Ortiz does a really good job overall, but how other areas can also make themselves a little bit visible. I've always was a fan of the mayor's office coffee hours. So I don't know if that's something that maybe BPS can think about doing it maybe in the summer, maybe during, I know during break is hard because our team also needs a rest, but that is one thing that I wanted to bring up that I didn't have an opportunity to do I think we talk a lot about our students and our staff, but how our parents and caregivers also have a better understanding of the overall leadership at the district is something that I think we should think through and maybe collaborate on how we could do that. A lot of work to do. I think the Green New Deal was definitely something that we were all expecting more, but your transparency on why you had to make the hard decision of sort of shifting what you all were ready to bring for us to discuss and vote. But I do want to not call out, but highlight that it can often bring anxiety to communities and families when we're discussing something that is important, is going to impact them and their families. Just thinking about that when we do have to make those hard decisions, right? On how we're going to communicate that in a way that they see it's coming from a place of care and it's coming from a place of we're holding ourselves accountable. We want to be urgent. We don't want to do a bandage approach, but a lot of these things that we often see our advocates and community members come to testify to us is conversations as they've been having, right? They've been having these conversations. So they definitely want to see urgency, but I urge that we are being careful with the urgency in itself. So it's not just us clicking up, checking a box, but making decisions that in the 2-3 years, we're not taking it back, right? So just wanted to share some of the highlights of what are some things that I thought about while I was going through providing the evaluation. It is also not only a reflection of your leadership, but the work that the district is doing. I commend y'all. It's a really hard job that y'all have. So like always, I'm here to provide support, but also be transparent on, what I do think, and hopefully I can bring solutions and not just highlight things that we need to work on. But thank you, Superintendent. Again, thank you, Dr. Oxen, Vice Chair O'Neill, for their leadership on this process. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Mr. Cardet Hernandez.
Thank you both for your work on this process, and I appreciated your sentiments, Dr. Elkins, this sort of calling in that the feedback is part of the work. And I often say this as someone who is newer to Boston. There's like a sort of a Boston niceness that I think serves folks well sometimes, but we've seen the historical outcomes here. I think that sort of gentle approach to feedback has not been good for kids. And so I appreciate a body that can do that, and the relationship we have with you, Superintendent, where you can hear where the concerns are and the best ways we think we can address them. A few things come to mind for me. I think there is some work as a body that I think is sort of interesting that we should be thinking about just around our own norming on these ratings. We are so far away from each other in many places on how we're experiencing and seeing the work. And that may be where we end up, but I think we would be negligent if we didn't try to tune in to understand why more. And so I don't know if, as a former principal, if I had a group of assistant principals who were rating one teacher so differently in the same domain, it would be time to tune in and understand sort of what the domain means, what the goal that we're looking at, and how do we measure results. So I think there's something there for us. I was not thrilled, as everyone I have shared, with how the retreat went previously, but maybe we can think about that retreat in a different way, so it is much more focused on these sorts of stuff and things and nuts and bolts. And then maybe there's a sort of second retreat that we revisit mid-year, so that norming is part of continuous work. Because the way this rolls out, right, is we get the superintendent's feedback, we rate independently, you guys take it, and this is the first conversation we have. And so there really then is never again another opportunity to norm on sort of how we are understanding what each of these ratings means. So food for thought for the chair and the vice chair specifically. I think just a few other things, just while my brain's on it. I think two things, and it's just one thing that I want to lovingly disagree with, which is that we have multiple years to wait to see growth. And I don't think that that was I don't think it was the intention of how it came off was not what you meant, Dr. Elkins, because I understand what you mean, like the actions will take time. But I just want to like name on a value level, like we don't have multiple years. We have 27% of fourth graders reading proficiently. And so to me, it is more than just high quality instructional materials and professional development taking shape. There's like policies and practices that have allowed for kids to move forward that we also have to be addressing. So I just want to like make space for the urgency to move results faster. And I've talked about that in my feedback around transformation schools and around literacy specifically, because I think that literacy is the hook for the future work. And so I just want to like make space for that, and not with no accusation of that's what you meant, just sort of like putting it out there and naming it. And I just want to echo the sentiments around inclusive education. I think we got a lot of feedback that the process wasn't clear, that folks didn't really get what they thought they were getting or what they needed, and that maybe, unfortunately, it felt like a little bit of smoke and mirrors. And so as we go into the next process, and we had raised concerns on this body of like, if you don't tell people what they can expect, like what's on the menu, they're going to try to order things that are off menu that we're not going to be able to cook. And so I think we have to start in this next process being really clear on like, what are the options? What is the funding mechanisms that folks can use? What are the types of classrooms we can build? I think there was a lot of confusion, and I think for some of it is unfortunate that we put educators in a situation to do planning for some of our most vulnerable kids, and then they felt like the district wasn't able to meet them there. So I'm just sort of like holding space for that as we move into next year. I will raise the same red flag that I continue to raise, which is my concern around the budget and the fiscal cliff, our clarity around it, but also where we're going. I worry we are going to find ourselves in a situation that we have seen other districts like us, like San Francisco in, where we have continued to overspend and not reduce the size of the system, and have to make dramatic decisions in a moment of urgency instead of the opportunity that we have to be really thoughtful about how we're thinking about the budget and the implications, knowing that like that requires us to do hard things on both sides. And I think two last thoughts. One on the family and community engagement. I agree those other things will probably get better. As the other sort of areas get better, family and community engagement will improve. But there is still a core of what we hear, which is that people don't feel like they know what's going on. And that, even we talk about it here, which is like, our feathers get ruffled and we're like, people don't know the great things that are happening in the system. Well, we're our messenger. And so like, that is an us problem, not a them problem. And so like, yes, as these other domains improve, you can imagine community engagement, family and community engagement could improve as a measure. But like, if we are still not great at communicating our own successes as well as areas of concern, people are still going to be disengaged. And I think that happens. And I share this feedback. Like, we have like a language problem, not just like the way that we translate for languages outside of English, but like just the jargon that we use here, comfortably use, and just like sort of apologize for using it and then proceed. As well as what I was so happy you referenced today, superintendent, but a tech problem. We have a really sort of an archaic user experience and user interface on multiple platforms that we ask people to engage with. And so if like those don't become easeful, the engagement with the system will continue to feel disruptive, and folks will feel like they're straddling hurdles to understand what's happening. So I think both things are true here, but I just want to hold space for that. And I'm excited to learn more about the website update and then all the other ways that we'll continue to think about technology as a way to sort of buffer any confusion. And then the last thing, I think, because I think it's more about us than about the superintendent, which is we had school leaders, 28% say that they felt like the district was held accountable for school performance. And in many ways, I thought that was like, actually, that was for the superintendent, but it was like a moment where we are in parallel process with the superintendent. That was also a measure for us that around our ability to hold the district accountable. That is what people believe our role is. And I think it goes back to the first point around our own norming, around like what is success and what is and what is acceptable, and what is the type of feedback that we think is appropriate to give to push and drive results, all of those in service of kids. So I'm sort of holding that and as I'm closing out tonight. But thank you again, Dr. Elkins and Vice Chair O'Neill, on the work. It is a hard task to do in the middle of the summer. So thank you guys for holding it down.
Thank you. Before I move on, just want to check in. Mr. Tron, do you have any comments you'd like to make?
Not at this moment. Thank you.
All right. Well, again, I just want to say thank you to Dr. Sorry, Mr. O'Neill.
All right, Madam Chair. So I was speaking before as, helping Dr.
Okay.
Elkins with this summative. I just wanted to make a couple of personal comments about how I approach it. And, this is the beauty of having a committee, right? 7 people, 7 different backgrounds, 7 different sets of experiences, and 7 different viewpoints. And then, we put it together and see that on some things we have some consensus and some things we push in different viewpoints. And that's the beauty of working together as a committee. So I actually enjoyed reading the other members' evaluations, writing my own. I did just want to note, when I wrote my own, I have done several of these evaluations, as a number of the members have, and I found myself thinking, where would I expect a superintendent to be at the end of 2 years with the challenges and the opportunities that we have? And I kind of use that as the prism of how I rated Superintendent Skipper. We did have, discussions. I know members asked questions about, well, are we evaluating the district, or are we evaluating the superintendent? Or by evaluating the superintendent, are we in effect evaluating the superintendent, evaluating the district? I share a lot of the concerns that fellow members raised about, we want tangible results. We want academic improvement. We want, more inclusive ed done right. We want more multilingual opportunities. We want clarity on the budget. We want more information about facilities planning. And I think Dr. Elkins did a nice job of making sure that those concerns were raised. I personally, in my evaluation, tried to balance where were the actions that the superintendent were taking going to lead to those improvements. And so that's the beauty, again, of being a committee of 7, right? And we all have different viewpoints. And I was pleased, Superintendent, I'm pleased myself with the progress I believe that you have made. I was also struck, and I called it out in my individual evaluation. I've said it publicly, this year I visited a number of schools with you, and to see your interactions with the school leaders and with the teachers and the paras and all who work in our schools. I am very supportive of where you are in your growth as our superintendent. Obviously, your background, your experience as a teacher and a school leader and the head of high schools, and the experience you gained in being a sitting superintendent elsewhere have come to bear for our district. I personally am cognizant of, and I know we all are, we referenced this a number of times, the challenges our district face and the incredible sense of urgency we all have on improving the education opportunity. Our children only have, hopefully 1 chance at first grade, 1 chance at second grade, 1 chance at third grade. And we can't wait and say, well, 5 years from now it'll be better. But we also know that steps need to be taken. And I just want to applaud the steps that I feel you've taken in your first 2 years. And your willingness to listen to the feedback that we give you of, we'd also like improvement on this, we need to get better on that. And that you accept it in the intent that we give it, which is, you assume good intent, right? We're trying to help the district get better. And I just wanted to speak and said, I appreciate that and look forward to seeing the tangible results next year and the year after from the actions that you have taken in your first 2 years in the role.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, again, I just want to say thank you to both you, Dr. Elkins, and Mr. O'Neill, for leading us in the process. And importantly, thank you to the superintendent, Skipper, and the team for their incredible amount of work that you've accomplished this past year. Superintendent, I want to thank you for the way you engaged in the evaluation process. It's never easy to put your heart and soul and work out there and to have people give feedback, but your commitment to continuous growth and improvement in service, both of your team and of our students and their families, is evident, particularly in the data you elevated, the reflections you shared, and your openness to discourse. Not everybody is going to put out there that there's only 28% of their school leaders who are in agreement here. And I mean, that was a big wake-up call for all of us, and will remain so, but thank you for your openness to putting that out there particularly. Last week, I attended the August Leadership Institute, and sitting among the many experienced and new leaders across our schools and in central office, I was filled with hope. I've been to a number of these as things have shifted and changed through the district over the last several years, but there was a sense of hope. Hope because of the leaders, both I had a chance to interact with, and both because of the direction of this coming school year that was shared. The work of Dr. Chen, Dr. DePina, Dr. Tavares' departments, centering on supporting our schools. I mean, that was clear in everybody's message, centering on our schools and all in service of our students. I mean, we've always said that, but you could feel that and see it in a different way. There is an intentional and strategic alignment, across each department to meet our district's priorities. And this is a testament to your leadership and your team. As a district, we're continuing to make steady progress on so many issues that have been stunting our district for decades. And as a full team, school committee and superintendent, we acknowledge we are not where we want to be by a long shot. We are aware of the problems, but we are also willing to tackle them at the root and unwaveringly focused on improving for the students and families we serve. We are moving in the right direction, and superintendent, you continue to build and develop the talents of your teams to take us there. I heard you loud and clear, Mr. Cardet Hernandez, about Boston Nice and about the work and the way we think about the way we do our work. As a committee, we have work to do. We will have a very different and a very focused, retreat this fall that we all need to be with. And one of the things that we haven't done also is reevaluate the superintendent. We need to do a self-evaluation of ourselves and our effectiveness as well, so that it's got to be both ways. So, and for me, similar to Mr. O'Neill, this fall, I will have served on this committee for 10 years, and during that, in that reflection, I have served under 3 interim superintendents, 3 superintendents, and 3 mayors. And in that time, we as a district have been through many ups and downs. Shifting leadership makes it difficult to make any kind of sustained, impactful progress. So when I think of this decade where our district has been, I'm quite pleased finally with the direction in which we are headed. I felt like we've been through the churn years. Change is difficult, but quite necessary if Boston students are to have the rigorous and rewarding programs and school facilities to support the learning we have long sought. Superintendent, you've got us on the right track, but it's not your work alone, as we've said many times tonight. We're going to get where we want to be. It is our collective responsibility. And together we must all commit to continued accountability, focused urgency, and sustainability. We are all partners in this work. And on this board, we have a responsibility to better our school system and to productively push for continuous improvement. And so in the fall, when we have our retreat to reshape our committee's goals in service of student achievement and outcomes and establishing clear means of accountability. So we will share dates and additional details in a future meeting about this. But again, thank you all once again to everyone involved in this process for your hard work and for your hard commitment and for your efforts are truly valued. And I see Dr. Alkins, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, it just made me think about just could we include then in the process for leading up to the retreat? I'm trying to remember how we did it last year, but I think to member Cardet Hernandez's point, we need to have some at least individual goal setting of like what we hope to get out of the meeting of the retreat. And I don't know that
Yes.
we've done that as I don't know that we've done that as a committee to actually come into the meeting and each of us has like a set of this is what we hope to get out of it. And then we can sort of move forward
Yeah.
collectively.
We can, I mean, we can talk offline about this, but we can do a pre-retreat, a planning meeting, a collective planning meeting to plan the retreat, because I think that's what I think I'm hearing you say. An opportunity for a collective conversation as we move forward to what we want our direction to be. So a meeting about the meeting, yes, we can work on that. But that means it will be a very busy mid-September and October for folks. So we will be needing to get several dates over successive weeks online, because otherwise, as we know, our year will be off and running and we'll be trying to get a meeting date.
No.
So I think one thing that could be helpful, if you know that there are clear dates that you will be away proactively, please send these to Lena so that we can figure out quickly what we might have in common so we can put a couple of dates on the books.
Yeah, and I don't mean to like, you know, jam up everybody's schedule. I think I just meant even if it's something simple as asynchronously, hey, every committee member lists 3 or 4 things that you want to accomplish at this meeting, because it gives us better sense of what everyone is coming into the meeting with and what they're hoping to get out of it. I don't think it needs to be another meeting, but I think it would be good to have like at least a list of priorities so that we can make sure that we are at least in part addressing that and in alignment with our goals. That's all I'm saying.
All right. We will work on that and have Lena get something out to you all within the next 2 weeks. Alrighty. If we have no further discussion, I'd like to turn this over and to Lena for Ms. Parbex for public comment.
Thank you. For some reason, I can't start my camera. Thank you, Chair. The public comment period is an opportunity for parents, caregivers, students, and other concerned parties to make brief presentations to the school committee on pertinent school issues. Questions on specific school matters are not answered at this time, but are referred to the superintendent for a later response. Questions on specific policy matters are not answered at this time, but may be the subject of later discussion by the committee. We have 7 speakers this evening. Each person will have 3 minutes to speak, and I will remind you when you have 30 seconds remaining. If your remarks are longer than 3 minutes, please email your comments for distribution to the committee. The time that an interpreter uses for English interpretation will not be deducted from a speaker's allotted time. Speakers may not reassign their time to others. Please direct your comments to the chair and refrain from addressing individual school committee members or district staff. Please note, the comments of any public speaker do not represent the Boston Public Schools or the Boston School Committee. Please state your name, affiliation, and what neighborhood you are from before you begin. Make sure you're signed into Zoom with the same name you used to sign up for public comment, and be prepared to unmute yourself and turn on your camera when it's your turn to testify. Raise your virtual hand when I call your name. We will begin with Deidre Manning, Mike Heichman, John Mudd, and Edith Bazil. Deidre Manning.
Oh, I'm in San Francisco. Not sure how that happened. My name is Deirdre Manning. I'm a Dorchester resident and mother of two school-age children. I wanted to start by saying that it's human nature to judge by appearances or perhaps by where somebody lives. I'd like you to know that I believe that BPS administrators look at me and they see privilege. They don't know that I grew up in a family that received fuel assistance. They don't know that as a teenager, I stood in a line to get surplus food, also known as the big blocks of fake cheese, that I had to sometimes get up really early to go to my high school to take a shower because the water had been shut off for non-payment. That when I went to college, the tuition actually costs more than what my mother makes. While I do believe that there are pockets of excellence throughout BPS, I feel like Superintendent Skipper and the senior leadership team haven't made changes to the exclusionary exam school admissions policy or found a permanent leader for the Henderson School. Both of these situations have caused my family an incredible amount of stress. If you were to look at my younger daughter's scores this year, after she started at the Murphy the end of September, and what they were at the Henderson, a school that was and still is in chaos, you would see stratospheric growth in her testing. And that's the difference that comes from being in a school that's stable versus one that BPS leadership seems to have just let languish or just abandon. If you're talking about wanting families to stay engaged and be committed, you need to have a team that addresses crises and fixes them. It's super frustrating to feel like there are band-aids, to sort of quote Superintendent Skipper saying earlier today. I'd love for the superintendent, the Office of Data and Accountability, and the school committee members to look at my daughter's test scores. As a result of the failure of BPS to provide for a stable environment at the Henderson, I sent my daughter to a charter school where she was cheated out of these so-called bonus points. They took steps to depress my daughter's GPA. There's a clear double standard where they use a special conversion process for BPS fifth graders who receive standards-based grades, and my daughter wasn't allowed to use it. As a result, I can't have any confidence that 2 years from now, I won't be entering another very stressful period where my daughter is excluded. So earlier this month, I pulled her from the Murphy School and I'm sending to a charter school where they have an excellent path to an excellent high school because I can't be left out of this process again. Policies and responses to crises should be encouraging families to stay, and that's not what's happening here. It's a shame.
Thank you, Ms. Manning. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Mike Heichman.
Whose children? Our children. Whose schools? Our schools. Evaluating the work of the superintendent is an important annual task for the school committee. At our last meeting, I had asked the school committee whether it had plans to invite the public to participate in this essential activity. Later in the meeting, Ms. Barboza followed up and asked whether there were plans to do this. Senior school committee member, Mr. O'Neill, gave a very long response, but totally and deliberately failed to answer her excellent question. The answer, Ms. Barboza, is that the school committee has no intention to encourage the community to become involved. You wouldn't dare because you would fear that the public would interfere with the fairy tale story that you want to tell the public. While you wouldn't dare to ask the public to participate in evaluating the superintendent, Beja decided to involve the public and conducted its own survey. These are our children in our schools, and our voices matter. I have read a draft of the report, and it is very critical of the superintendent. Question: did Mayor Wu interfere in any way with your evaluation of the superintendent? I will send you my entire testimony. I will run out of time. Therefore, I need to say my final comment before I run out of time. We need an elected school committee and a new superintendent. You have aggressively increased racism and inequities. A few examples. From the very beginning of your misleadership, you fired Black and Brown Central Office workers and replaced them with those loyal to you. Dr. Charles Granson, the Chief Equity Officer, wrote you a letter expressing concerns about the mistreatment of Black and Brown Central Office workers. You fired him. When Dr. Casilius was our CEO and under the leadership of Dr. Granson, community equity roundtable discussions were held on a regular basis to discuss how different parts of the system would benefit with an equity analysis. These meetings were excellent. Under your misleadership, CERT died. You have failed to use the racial equity tool to evaluate the effects of your proposed policies. Without prior community involvement and without using the racial equity tool, you and the mayor aggressively attempted to move the O'Brien from the heart of the African-American community to white West Roxbury.
30 seconds.
2, the spread of a toxic culture which began at the very beginning of your regime and recently described in great detail by the release of Silence Speaks, 100+ voices beyond the trauma. The authors of this report believe that the major reason for the retaliation and harm done to these school leaders is because they had dared to speak out in opposition to your policies. This report characterized—
Thank you very much, Mr. Heichman. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is John Mudd.
My name is John Mudd. I'm a resident of Cambridge and a longtime advocate for the Boston Public Schools. I'm sorry to say I really can't hide my deep disappointment in what I've seen of the evaluation process so far. I wrote you a very detailed memo, but my overall concern is I don't get a sense that you are recognizing the full dimensions of how profoundly we are failing too many students in Boston today. I don't get a sense of urgency in saying that we must change our approaches and that we don't have 3 to 5 years to wait to see how what I would say many questionable strategies will play out. I think that the school committee needs to figure out how it reorganizes itself so it can focus in some deep dives, as the jargon has it, into specific strategies. And you need to decide how much you want to exercise critical leadership versus being apologists. I sent you a memo which gives some very specific and wide range of examples. You say that you are focused on student outcomes. Well, how much is that true? From my perspective, I look at issues like the achievement gaps. What has happened with those achievement gaps? And how is this being incorporated in the evaluation? On teacher diversity, there's some words, but what are the successes? And how much are we really making any progress and recognizing the need for teacher diversity by language? On equity, you are not implementing. I've read 20, 30, 40 racial equity planning tools, and they are never have they followed the specific instructions about laying out the logic of how gaps will be enclosed. And this involves equitable literacy. I don't see yet the equity in equitable literacy. Do you? What's the data? Where are the student outcomes? On inclusion, there are huge issues about special education implementation. There are even more issues about even the approach on English learners. On community engagement, many of us have said for years, you need to take plans when they are in draft stages to the community to get their advice. The system says we will only involve the community in implementation, not planning. That is a failure change it.
Thank
please.
you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mudd. Next speaker is Edith Bazil.
Thank you. Mayor Wu's education equity agenda states, quote, "Our system should be led by anti-racist policies that undermine structural inequities rather than perpetuate them," end of quote. How has BPS done in racial equity? BPS planned to tear down McKinley South End Academy and take the land to build a new Quincy Upper. The public protested and Quincy Upper got another site. In 2021, construction began. Quincy Upper's $193 million cutting-edge 6-story facility with rooftop classrooms on an acre of land will open this fall. What did McKinley schools get? More cameras on top of metal detectors, random searches, physical restraints, and seclusions in dilapidated buildings that are run like holding cells with no libraries, science labs, cafeterias, or gyms. Mayor Wu's educational equity agenda calls for equitable investment in schools and students with mental and behavioral health issues. So why has McKinley's rebuild been suspended? The mayor called for valuing, quote, "all educators, creating safe, inclusive, anti-racist schools," end of quote. But Black educators have been mistreated, systematically pushed out, and racial equity initiatives Black educators fought for since desegregation have all been disbanded. Where's the urgency? When the community raised complaints, the chair scolded the community, stating to the superintendent, quote, "I've got your back," end of quote. I agree, Chair. You need to do a self-evaluation. Today, the superintendent said she is rebuilding racial equity. You don't get credit for dismantling racial equity and claim to rebuild it in the moment of your evaluation. The superintendent received a high rating for schools simply for possessing high-quality instructional materials. Really? This is tantamount to scraping the bottom of the academic pudding cup, especially when 80% of fourth graders cannot read proficiently. Shockingly, this school committee today rated the superintendent overall proficient, which feels like a race to the bottom. Your evaluation is a betrayal to excellence. Black lives in BPS have been devalued, dismissed, and
30
disrespected.
seconds.
But as the chair stated, quote, "Superintendent, I've got your back," end of quote. Shame on you.
Thank you very much. Next group of speakers are Ruby Reyes, Sequoia Craig, and Zuleika Soto. Ruby Reyes.
Good evening. My name is Ruby Reyes, and I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Education Justice Alliance and Dorchester resident. In June 2024, the Beja community organized a people's evaluation of the Superintendent Mary Skipper. Because Superintendent Skipper's evaluation is based on the opinions of the school committee and the mayor, parents, students, and educators, or those most directly impacted by her leadership, are completely left out of the process. The Beja People's Survey is based on the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education Superintendent Evaluation questions. We ran this survey throughout the summer and hope to begin this process annually to incorporate authentic community engagement practices. Some of the results of the Beja People's Evaluation include the following. In the area of community engagement, to the question, how well does the superintendent involve students, families, educators, and community members from diverse backgrounds to make sure their voices are understood and included in decision-making processes, 68% of survey respondents answered not at all or poorly. One of the comments was the superintendent makes a show of family community engagement with surveys and Zoom meetings, but makes her decisions with no regard for that input. In the question of how effectively does the superintendent hold school leaders accountable to ensure they are improving their schools, 56% of the survey responded said not effectively at all. One comment shared was, after 10 years in Boston, I have had 6 principals. Just 2 have had positive leadership approach, in my opinion, and 1 of them left the district. The remaining 4 are still principals in other BPS schools. I think there's very much a culture of passing principals onto other schools instead of letting them go. In terms of data-informed decision-making and the use of the racial equity planning tool, 43% had not heard of the tool, and 56% had received no training and not seen the tool used at all. In terms of addressing family concerns, 58% of respondents answered that the superintendent was not effective at all. For staffing support, 69% said the schools were not being staffed to meet the needs of all students. In terms of school safety, health, and supportive environments, the following respondents felt the superintendent was effective or very effective. 16% in terms of safety, 10% in creating healthy environments, and only 15% in providing emotional supports. Overall, Superintendent Skipper received a cumulative average of 32 out of 100. According to the BPS grading policy, a student must score at least 80% in summative tasks. Superintendent Skipper did not demonstrate competency. Beyond numbers, the comments left by respondents were most disturbing. We deserve so much better.
Thank you, Ms. Reyes. The next speaker, Akoya Craig, is not in the meeting, so we will go with Zuleika Soto.
Good evening. My name is Zuleika Soto, South End resident, BPS graduate, BPS parent, and a member of BEJA. I'm here to continue to share the results of the Pupil Superintendent Evaluation, which reveals serious and widespread concerns about the Superintendent Skipper's leadership. The community has made its voice clear. 68% of respondents feel that the Superintendent Skipper does not at all or only poorly involves diverse voices in decision-making. One parent shared, when families have requested meetings with district officials above the regional superintendent, they have been dismissed out of hand, referred to district staff who do not respond to phone calls or emails, and who will not schedule meetings. This reflects a deep disconnect between leadership and the community it serves. Communication is another significant issue, with around 89% of respondents stating that the superintendent has failed to ensure transparency and timely communication. An educator expressed this frustration, stating, Ms. Skipper wants the compliance of the community. She wants to manage the dissemination of information so that the community will have a favorable view of her in the system. She manufactures good news and attempts to censor and punish criticism. Family concerns are also being ignored. Around 91.5% of respondents reported that the superintendent does not at all or poorly supports equitable solutions when handling issues such as special education services or complaints about the school administration. As one parent noted, Superintendent Skipper ignores and fails to address parent and families' concerns, hiding behind a curtain of lies. The treatment of our families feels like relegating them to second-class citizenship. Additionally, staff retention and development have been neglected. An educator remarked, I have worked for other districts that encourage all employees to work towards the next level in their career. BPS is lacking in pathways that encourage career advancement. This failure to promote diversity and inclusion within the workforce has left many feeling unsupported and marginalized. Based on this evening overwhelming feedback, the community gives Superintendent Skipper an overall grade of F or ineffective for her performance. This leads us to a critical point. The evaluation process itself must be improved. Currently, the superintendent's evaluation is conducted with limited input from the community. This process needs to be more transparent and inclusive. The voices of students, families, and educators and community members should be central to the evaluation. This means incorporating broader feedback, ensuring diverse perspectives are heard, and making the process more accessible to those most impacted by the superintendent's decisions. It's time for change, not just in leadership, but in how we hold that leadership accountable, including yourselves. We urge the school committee to reform the evaluation process to reflect the real
Thank you, Ms.
experience of
Soto.
the community.
Your
and to
time is
ensure
up.
Our schools are led by someone
Thank
committed
you.
to every student's success. Thank you.
Chair, that concludes our public comment.
All right, thank you, Ms. Parvex. And again, thank you to those of you who spoke this evening and shared your perspectives. Your testimony is very important to us. Is there any new business? Hearing none, that concludes our business for this evening. The next hybrid school committee meeting will take place in person on August 28th at 6 p.m. at the Boulding Building. If there's nothing further, I'll now entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Parvex, will you please call the roll?
You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're echoing, but
Yeah, sorry. I'm having
Okay.
problems with my. Let's see. There. Dr. Alkins, Mr. Cadell Hernandez,
Yes.
Ms. Lima Barbosa,
Yes.
Ms. Polanco Garcia, Mr. Tran,
Yes.
Mr. O'Neill,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
yes.
Thank you.
Thank you all and see you next week. Good night.
Thank
Night.
you.